Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come here with us and spend a bit of time learning how to run the Slido Q&A like a pro. We're going to go through the setup, like all the pre-work, all the way to live, and we're even going to discuss a little bit about what to do afterwards to make sure that your Q&A is tip-top. You should have everybody joining us here in WebEx, the sidebar open with Slido already, but if you don't, not a problem, we have your back. You can head to slido.com in your browser or another device and use the hashtag like a pro, and you'll be able to join our event. Or of course, please use your phone and scan the QR code and you can join that way as well, whatever works for you. So who have you got with you here today? So my name is Jason, but please call me Jay. Everyone at Slido does, and I feel like I'd be in trouble if somebody called me Jason here at work. It'd be strange for me to hear it. I think my mum might be one of the only people that calls me Jason anymore. I work for the customer care team, so if we've got anyone here that's ever contacted our support, there's a strong possibility that we have crossed paths before, so it's nice to interact with you again. We've also got Nadia joining us a bit later. Nadia is our head of thought leadership and has potentially the coolest job title in the world. And as we mentioned before, she's an absolute Q&A pro. And we've got Andrew as well, who is part of our customer education team. He is a technical wizard and is going to show us hands-on what's going on with Slido today. So bit of housekeeping before we start. If you are taking any notes, fear not, you don't need to, unless of course you are an avid note taker, in which case note away. But the session is being recorded, and we will be sharing the recording along with the slides afterwards, as well as any other resources that we touch upon today during the session. And that kind of gets us to this point where I'd love to know from everyone that we've got here so far, what are your expectations and what are you hoping to learn from today's session? So you've given us your time, which we are so appreciative of. But is there anything particular that you are looking for? And that could be it could be the technical side, the setup, right? That's always a tricky bit and something that people can get hooked up on quite easily. Certainly, it's something I will always worry about, the technical stuff. Or is it, we've got one in so far, become more confident in setting up? Absolutely, right? And that pre-work is so important. Hints and tips for using Slido live and in person, that's great, because Nadia is going to be able to definitely dig into that a bit later. Polishing my skills from beyond basics, that's very cool. So overall knowledge, using comfortability, setting up and using with ease. Okay, so there's a lot of like wanting to get into the nitty-gritty and learn pitfalls to avoid. That's very cool. Learn more about the software, setup. Oh, they're all, look at them, they're piling in now. This is really cool. Well, we've got loads and loads of content to go through today. So please send these in. Any questions that you have as well, please don't forget to send those in. So just so that you know as well, last week we had a session called Leading with Transparency, the Power of Leadership Q&As. It was really interesting with loads of insights from our GM Pally as well as our head of people, Kathy. If you missed it, not a problem. We have a recording. I think the link might be shared in the chat today or certainly in the resources afterwards. It's also available on our website. But anybody that was at that session and you're here today, it's really nice to have you back, but are definitely worth checking out for sure. It was really, really interesting. So let's talk about the agenda today. I'm going to kick things off a little bit and talk about why you should use the Slido Q&A. What are the benefits? What value does it bring to you? Then I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who's going to do a Q&A demo, very hands-on demo, and show you how to set up as well as run Slido. And then we're going to bring Nadia in for a fireside chat, and we are going to go through maybe some of the higher level aspects of running a Q&A, and certainly some of the facilitation side of it as well. because as I mentioned, she's a pro with it all. So let's start with my section then. So why use the Slido Q&A? Like, why is it so important? And before I tell you, I do want to know as well, like, how do you currently feel about running a Slido Q&A? Are you in like total despair with it, right? Not sure where to start, or like afraid of it? Or are you on the other side of the spectrum with like hearts in your eyes, like see all the potential? Maybe you've used it before, maybe you're here to learn a little bit more, and more of the nuances, or as we can see, quite a few people sitting in the middle, which is great, right? But it doesn't matter where you are here, because this webinar is definitely going to touch upon a bit of everything, which is really cool. We're also going to have definitely going to have some time for a Q&A. We've got kind of two. We've got my section, but then it's kind of split into two. We've got Andrew's section, where he's going to be talking about the technical side, and his Q&A will focus a little bit more on these technical questions. But then when we head over to Nadia as well, we'll be talking a little bit more about the facilitation stuff as well. So as I said, please send in your questions into the Q&A, and please make sure that you're upvoting other questions that you see as well, so that we know which ones are like really relevant to you, and which questions are, or which topics are like really burning in your mind. But yeah, thank you so much for contributing to that poll. Now, did you know that 42% of meeting attendees left a meeting without saying what was on their mind, right? And why is that such a big deal? Well, actually, if you think about it, that's almost half your audience, right? And what if in that 42%, there was this golden idea that somebody could have asked but didn't? This golden, like this question that maybe sparks a topic that could transform your business, right? But maybe that person or those people didn't have the space to ask the question, or maybe they did have the space, but they didn't have the confidence to, right? And they didn't feel like they could ask it. I'm definitely a person that shies away from asking questions in a big space, right? Because sometimes I feel like I might sound silly. And Slido allows you to ask these questions anonymously, right? And this is to sort of tackle that that fear of speaking problem, right? And it's one of our big features. And it kind of means that like no good question is going to go unnoticed, okay? But while we're talking about like anonymous, right, and especially anonymous within Slido, I've got, of course, another poll. Like, the Slido Q&A is truly anonymous, true or false? What do people think? So our Q&A, you as a participant are asking a question in the Q&A anonymously. Is it actually anonymous, true or false? What do people think? So I'm going to give a bit of time for some of these submissions to come through, and then I will reveal the question, which is too true, right? There is a correct answer, and it is too true. I can understand why people might not trust it, right? Of course, because you think there's got to be a way to link your to link my responses back to me. We get this question a lot on customer care and in our support team, where people get in touch and they're I'm paraphrasing, but they'll say like, "Yo, Jay, Bud, I had this really interesting Q&A the other day, and I want to reach out to some of the people who asked some of the questions. Can you tell me who they are?" We cannot. An anonymous question in Slido is entirely anonymous. You cannot trace it back to the person that asked it. Of course, you can prevent anonymous questions in the settings, right? That's something you can do. But when it has been asked anonymously, it is anonymous. Okay, so now Slido, right? It offers a lot, right? And interaction especially, right? And that's something that you see at the face value of Slido, right? It offers interaction and engagement, and that's what our Q&A can give for you, right? But actually there's a bit more to it, right? And we like to say that it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Because we have these deeper values that you can discover beneath the surface. And just like you can see in the image of this iceberg, right? And there's usually much more to meeting culture than what meets the eye. And a good Q&A can actually help you achieve this deeper value by giving you, your participants, your colleagues, or your employees a way to be like truly open with yourselves or leadership and with each other. And it also provides an opportunity to give transparent answers while acknowledging those really difficult, tricky questions. And if you're able to like maintain this really open and inclusive dialogue, meetings actually become a place of safety and trust, right? Where diversity of thought and opinion is actually really encouraged. And the ultimate hope is that everybody feels really valued and appreciated and listened to. So that is like a fantastic reason to use Slido Q&A, right? Now, I talked to you about why to use it, but I would love now to hand over to Andrew to run you through a live demo. Andrew, over to you, my friend.
Perfect. Thank you, Jay. Very happy to let Slido shine and show a little demo here. So of course, I'm going to be focusing on the Slido Q&A, but just before I get started, I'm curious to know how familiar you are with Slido. So everyone joining us today, maybe you've used Slido as a participant. I mean, you're using it now as a participant. So I didn't give the option that you haven't used it at all, because hopefully if you're here, you're at least voting and you're using it. And I can see the top option was rising up. Used it as a host with the Slido integration. Very impressive. So we do have some smart cookies here today. You're going to give me a bit of a run for my money in terms of a demo. So as I mentioned at the start, hopefully there's something for everyone, whether you're just a rookie, just discovering Slido, or if you know a thing or two and you want to learn some advanced settings. So it will be very cool to show you this, dive a little bit deeper into the Q&A and see what can be achieved with it. Nice. Looks like we have more pros than newbies, if you will. But for those of us who are just starting out and you want to know how to get started with Slido, then there are a few simple steps. So of course, it's a web-based app. You would go to slido.com, and from there you can log in if you already have an account or sign up, and it's totally for free. Next, you would create your Slido, adjust the dates that you want it to run for, and give it a name. So that's pretty simple, right? So let's dig into the rest of it. We actually have 3 different modes in Slido, and that is the admin mode, the participant mode, and I guess you guys already know this because you seem pretty well versed, but the last one is the present mode of Slido. So I'm going to go through each of these and show you how it all works throughout this demo. The first thing we're going to do is the admin mode, and I'm going to take you over here to the Slido that we are already using today. So this is the one that we've attached to this webinar with the event code like a pro. So as I'm doing this demo and showing you behind the scenes on the admin mode, you can actually interact as a participant and see everything from that end. So we do have some questions in here, some people putting their questions in anonymously, some with a name. So thank you so much, keep them coming. Through this demo, I'll be addressing some of these questions as I'm showing you how it all works. So as you can see, this is our audience Q&A tab right here. This is the admin mode where you would begin if you're creating your Slido, if you are the host and you're running Slido during a meeting, this is where you can control everything from the back end. So that's where we're going to start and show you how you can actually manage those questions. So at the moment, the moderation is turned off. So questions will come in automatically and show live, as you can see here. I am in the admin side, so I can look at all these options. There's a 3-dot menu here underneath each question. And the main thing I want to show you on this little choice of options is the reply button, where I can actually reply to a question as a moderator. So here's one from Pedro. Thank you very much. When is Slido going to be available for PowerPoint on Mac? Big question that I can't quite give you an answer on, but it is coming this year. Our little worker bees are working very hard on it. So we don't have an exact date yet, but it is coming this year and we're very excited. The Slido for PowerPoint integration is amazing. So far it's only worked on Windows, but it is coming. We're working on it for Mac. So that's my moderator reply. Pedro can now see that in the attendee side of Slido, and anyone else in the webinar who has joined the Slido can actually see that reply from me as the moderator. Now, what I'm going to do is actually turn the moderation on here so we can see how that works, because that might be something you're interested in. You're worried about the questions that you're getting and you want to control which ones go live and which ones you can actually not show live. And here's a great one. Star Trek is better than Star Wars. Disagree, you're wrong. I would probably disagree, so I am wrong. And what I can do here on the little 3-dot menu that we have is privately reply. This is going to kick it all off here. It's a debate, people. Do not agree. Sorry. And I can send this reply while the question is in the moderation window. And this is a private reply, as you can see. So only the person that sent this question will be able to see this reply. And as this is something, thank you so much whoever sent this, it's perfect for this demo. It's not relevant to the topic. So I can actually dismiss it by clicking this button. And maybe I can approve this one because I agree that Star Wars is way better. Actually, I like those new Star Trek movies. I'm just not a big Trekkie, as you would say. So there you go. So that's your moderation. I can approve or dismiss. I'm going to turn it off for now because we like to have the moderation off and have your questions coming in. And the other basic functionalities of Slido here, I can manage from the back end. So I can actually highlight certain questions like this one from Pedro we already had. So it sticks to the top just like that. And you'll see that in your participant side as well. And it will obviously stick up in the present mode, and we'll get to that in a moment so you can see how you can present Slido and show the question wall. And I can just mark that as answered again with the tick like this. The final thing I want to show here is you might be wondering where all these questions go, whether they are dismissed from the moderation window or marked as answered from here. Well, the answer is they go into the archive, and that's this tab to the right. And I can see some people struggling to get in, but you got in. Well done, Nisha. The Star Wars, Star Trek questions are there that I have dismissed. As you can see, this one is marked as answered. So it's all here in the archive for you to have and look after your event. So something I want to show you is how we would typically run our Q&A in a Slido meeting, whether that's a bigger meeting like an all hands or just an AMA session. This is how we would set up our Q&A, and I want to show you the further settings. So you can access the settings from this settings wheel here, or from here, or right here. So click one of these, and we're in our settings. We want to go to the Features tab on the left, and as you can see on the top, we have our Audience Q&A. So we toggle this, and you can see the moderation I've already turned off. We don't use moderation for our Slido events, but we do use the labels. So I'm going to turn on the labels feature. And what this means is that we can actually create labels to put on different questions. So this is useful if you have questions you're directing to a certain department, like the HR team or the exec team, or for example, certain people that are on a panel for a Q&A. So for today, I will be taking your technical questions to the best of my ability. So I will add a new label with my name. And I can add this. I can also uncheck this icon so that participants can add the label themselves. So when you're putting in a question, this gives you the option to actually add the label. That'll be active in just a moment. That makes my life easier so I don't have to put it on manually myself. Now, believe it or not, we use the downvoting feature in Slido as well as upvoting. So if you know Slido, you know that you can upvote the questions and the most popular ones will go to the top. We put in the downvotes so that those questions are truly fighting for their life and fighting to get to the top, making it a bit more dynamic. And we continue that dynamic energy by putting on the participant replies to questions. First, you saw the moderator replies, then you saw the private moderator replies, and now it's the participant replies. How exciting. So once I hit save on this, you'll be able to do all of this within the participant mode. I can actually put on the labels myself. So here's a question from Rebecca, and I can manage it. It's a technical question for me. On the 3-dot menu, now the Add Label button has appeared. That's for me. I can tick it, and there we go. I can see Nadia's name here. I can click Add Label, and I can add a label on the go. It truly is wonderful. Nadia, there you go. So we have 2 labels set up, and you can actually see those as a participant. And that's the next thing I'm going to show you, is the participant mode of Slido. So if you're in this webinar, again, you can see the participant mode already. If you're watching from the future on the recording, hello, I will show you what the participant mode looks like right here. And the way I'm going to access that is actually through the admin, because there is a way that you can test Slido by clicking on this participant mode tab right here. And then I can enter questions to test before your event is live, for example. Just make sure everything's running okay. And I can see all your questions that have come in. So now that I've changed the settings, you can see that I can downvote a question. That was actually a question I put, so I don't actually have to feel bad for downvoting that. I'll not downvote an actual question from anyone. I can also reply, and this is as a participant, but it's also me. So I can be anonymous, put my name in there and send it. And then anyone can see that reply and add their own reply if they want to. So there you go, that's the participant mode. Of course, I can put in a label here on a question. I'm a Star Wars guy, add a label for me and send it. So please feel free to add the labels as your questions are coming in. Another cool thing I can do within the admin here is actually filter by the labels by clicking on this on the top right, and I can filter for the questions that are for me. So there you go. That's pretty nifty. Might be something you want to do. Now next we come to the Slido present mode, where you can actually show your questions live on the wall, highlight them so they're sticking to the top, and easily manage them for everyone to see on the screen. So again, we go back to our trusty admin, and you may know this already. We have the present mode button right here. We click on that, and then we can see our questions. So all the details and info is here. Join at slido.com with this code. You can scan this QR code, of course. That is unless you want to use one of our Slido integrations that we've touched upon briefly. I will be showing you a lot more about those in just a second. But if you're running a meeting as a solo presenter, maybe an AMA or something like that, it's good to use this present mode, and you can actually manage everything from here. So I can take this question, the latest one, and actually highlight just like I can in the admin, and someone can't see the present mode buttons, but hopefully you just did, as I just showed you it. So I'm hoping that that's clear. And there we go. I've answered the question. I can mark it as answered. So this is cool. Lots of questions coming in here, which we like to see. The next thing to show you on our demo journey is how we actually run things on this webinar, for example, or on a typical Slido all hands. We actually use our Slido integrations, and this is where it gets really easy, and you're using the tools that you actually work with day to day. So these are all the ones that we have available at the moment: WebEx, PowerPoint, Teams, Google Slides, and coming soon, you're hearing it here first, or maybe you've heard it before, but we do have an integration for Zoom that's coming up, and we're very excited about that also, as well as the PowerPoint for Mac, which is coming soon. Just repeating that in case anyone needs to hear it. So lots of good things in the pipeline. The integrations that we are using are WebEx for the participant mode that you can see in the webinar, and Google Slides is what we're sharing on the screen right here, and that's where we've embedded the Slido present mode. So let's start there with Google Slides. This is an add-on, and you can get that from our website and easily add it. So once you go into your Google Slides deck, you'll be able to see the Slido button at the top. It will give you the sidebar, as you can see here, and then you will log in. So what I'm going to do is truly go behind the curtain here and show you what it's like for us. I'm going to hit the escape button on our presentation, and I'm going to show you what it looks like to add the Google Slides integration for Slido. So here we are. you're really seeing behind the scenes here. And we've clicked on the Slido button. Obviously, we've added this beforehand. You would log in and you can select the Slido event that you've already created, or you can create a new one from here and add all of your interactions. So we've already ticked it. We go in here and yeah, as you know, Jay has been expertly running this session, doing an intro, and the slides are within our deck. When he comes to one, it shows up for you right there on the screen. The thing that I want to show you and what we still need to do is actually add our Q&A slide. So here's our technical Q&A. I'm going to pop it in there, and on this sidebar, I'm going to click on the Q&A. And this will give us our wall. And we will come back to that in just a little moment. You can see all those questions are there because we've attached the same Slido event that we were just looking at, and that's attached to this webinar. So all I need to do at this point is attach the WebEx integration and add Slido there. So imagine you are just about to start your meeting and you're opening up the WebEx call. What I'll do is actually share the window here and show you how you can access Slido. If you have a paid WebEx account, you should have access to Slido. If there's any problems with that, you can contact your full WebEx admin, but you should be able to see it, and the way that you can access it is from your apps button down here and clicking on Slido. And there you go, Bob's your uncle. It's right there. We've already attached it. There's all our polls. There's a Q&A session. I can click on that and it's all in here. And of course I can highlight and mark the questions as answered from here, but I don't want to do that because I'm going to use both of these integrations together as we do. Hello, Jay, give us a wave. Thank you, thank you. So the next thing I need to do is actually share my content where Google Slides is. So we click on the share button, we go to screen 2, and we share. So here we are. We're on our technical Q&A, and all I need to do is click through my slides. And there you go. I can see all the Slido questions coming up. So Jay, you can breathe a breath of fresh air. You don't have to do this section. I am back. And here we go. We've got about 5 minutes or so, and I'm going to answer some of the most burning questions here. So this seems to be the most popular one from Rebecca. So I can highlight that from the Google Slides integration. It really is great. And you want to know how we can send a feedback survey after our events. So of course I can show you that. I will go back to the admin side of Slido, and here we are in the live polls tab. So in order to do that, we have our webinar feedback that's already set up. We will be activating this at the end, but to actually send that after a meeting, you can click on the 3-dot menu right here and click on share. And that's where you can get the direct link. So you can then send that to anyone after the meeting on email or wherever you exchange work messages, and they can click that link and get straight in to the survey. It really is very good. So keep upvoting those questions. I see we don't have very many upvotes, but I'm going to answer as many as I can in the next few minutes. So anonymous question here. Okay, so can you have a separate admin looking after the questions while someone else presents? Yes, you absolutely can. So the way in which you would do that is you would have someone in the admin here who can actually be in your Q&A and moderate the questions or highlight them. And then you could have someone else who's actually presenting. So they could maybe be showing the present mode of Slido while someone else is in the back end. And that might be an easier way for you to run things. If there's a lot of questions coming in, that person in the back end can decide which one to highlight. It will come up on the screen and then they can answer it. And of course, they can activate different polls and things like that to show up on the screen. But using the integrations is really the best way, because even if it is a large meeting, you can do it all yourself. You can put the Q&A interaction where you need it to be. You can highlight it and mark it as answered like this. And you can have your polls in the right position so that they just pop up and activate for the participants. So Ian, How do you hand off between multiple presenters with Slidos? Maybe that's a bit more of a question for Nadia, or maybe it's on the technical side. Let me just think. The way you would do that technically, I mean, usually there would just be one person sharing, right? But if you have someone in the back end with Slido, you can share access with people. So that would be in your settings from here or here or here. And you can actually share access by sending an email invite to people. So that's what we've done today. We have some people managing Slido in the background for me to help with those questions, and I'm showing it on the screen. So I'm not sure if I really answered that, but hopefully that was the tip. We can keep your question there in case Nadia wants to add any wisdom. This is definitely one for Nadia. What if I get hundreds of questions for moderation? It scrolls so quickly. She can tell you all her pro tips for managing that. Let's take this one from Danielle. Can you integrate with WebEx the same way you're seeing the live questions in Google Slides, as opposed to the right sidebar in WebEx? So the way to look at this is that Google Slides is the present mode that is integrated. So the Q&A wall and the live poll results on the screen. And the WebEx integration is the participant mode of WebEx that's within your WebEx call or your WebEx webinar, so that participants don't need to join Slido on a separate browser or on their mobile phone. So that's the way to look at that. I hope that's clear. Take a couple more questions. There's the fake question I put in for Nadia, so I can get rid of that. All right, anonymous question. What top tips do you have for running live Q&As without integrations and add-ons? Would love to have them, but not an option, sadly. So some people might be a bit restricted in their companies and they can't get the add-ons whitelisted and things like that. I understand. For me, I would say, just as I was showing you, you can show the present mode right here. And there is a control bar. So not only can you kind of highlight the questions and mark them as answered, the control bar down here lets you see all your pre-created polls. And you can just activate those whenever you want, and then it will come up on the screen. And then people can join Slido by scanning the QR code on their phone or by going to the browser, slido.com, and putting in the code. So old-fashioned way with present mode, sharing that on your screen, I'd say that's the best thing. Okay, I'll take one more from Ian. Hopefully one from you I can actually answer, Ian. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear before. Can we rearrange a question and drag it up to be answered a second or third, like in order? Well, there is some things you can do there. So if I go into the admin here and into our Q&A, I can actually filter the questions by recent so that I can see them by recent here. Now, I don't think this actually affects the participant mode, but at least from here, if you're managing it from the back end, then you can see the most recent questions and it's easier for you to grab them and highlight them. So a slew of questions there, but I'm very excited for our Fireside Chat. So I will hand it back over to Jay. I hope you enjoyed the demo. And yeah, there you go, Jay. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. As I said before, always a pleasure to watch you demo, right? Yeah, it was fantastic, and I hope everybody got some great tips and some of their questions answered as well. And what we will do as well is share afterwards any of the technical questions that were missed. What we will do is make sure that we get back to those post-event as well. We'll address each of the questions and make sure that you get an answer for them as well. So, but yes, next up, would like to introduce Nadia to the stage, everybody. She is, as I said before, our head of thought leadership, the coolest title. I'm very jealous of it. But also, Nadia, you play an enormous role in Slido in the sense that you're helping to run sort of our like bigger internal events, right? Some like our monthly all hands, and when we have like big ad hoc sessions, like today, you helped to run or facilitate a strategy session for the company. Because like as a facilitator, right, you play this important role because you were like helping like manage the flow and dynamics of the session, right? Which definitely helps the company become more aligned. But I think it's probably better for you to maybe tell everybody a little bit about what you do, and particularly your role as a facilitator.
Sure, and thank you so much, Jay, and hello everyone. So good to be here. It's a long time since I've been to a Slido webinar, so super happy to be back. So as Jay mentioned, my role is, before the event, more in the back end, helping and working closely with our internal comms team and also with our exec team to prepare the best all hands ever, of course, since Slido is all about meetings. And then during the live sessions, I'm helping to moderate the Q&A. I'm looking into the back end and picking which questions should be asked. And yeah, I would say in one way, when it comes to the meetings, my role is to take care of the flow so that the leadership on the virtual stage can then take care of the content and prepare the answers.
Perfect, thank you. That's great. And great to hear. Now, before we I've got some questions for you, Nadia, but I'd also like to take some from the audience as well, and from the participants. But before we do, one more poll for everybody before we kick into those. In 1 or 2 words, what are the biggest challenges? What's the biggest challenge that you face when facilitating Q&A sessions at your company? Right, people won't ask questions, right? Of course, that's tricky, right? The silence, absolutely. But I'm hoping that, like we've seen today, people are actually encouraged to ask their questions in the sidebar, or through Slido rather. Aligning several leaders. Oh goodness, yeah. Nadia, what do you think?
It's interesting that for some people it's the silence, that people who will not ask questions, and then okay, now Slido listens to me. The opposite of that is too many questions, right? So it's so interesting to see, and from my experience, and I've been in Slido for, gosh, I think it will be 7 years very soon. And I think, when I was still in sales, it was also very much a cultural difference. Like in some regions of the world, it was even, it was not considered polite to ask questions or challenge your leadership. Whereas on the other side of the planet, it was, feedback was very welcome. And it was about how do you manage the influx of opinions and inputs when everybody has a voice. So super interesting to see. And I'm very happy to touch on everything you have said here. Looking at what else is coming through, coordinating, repeated questions, tech failure, okay, unclear questions, time, anonymity is king, interesting. Personal comments, not questions. That is a very interesting and very relevant input for sure. Okay, Jay, is there anything that speaks to you from this work?
Well, no, we mentioned the anxiety of tech failure. That's always for me, that's always a thing. Like, I trust tech, but at the same time, the worry of it going wrong is just frightening. But actually, like, I've certainly found that, like, especially with Slido, like, it's crazy reliable, but that anxiety is very real, because it's like the more you're juggling, the more it feels like stuff could go wrong, right? Which is why you need to be using tools that you can absolutely trust and that you've practiced with and you know how they work. But thank you. So thank you everybody for your insights there. So Nadia, like, I've got a few questions for you, and I'm obviously sprinkle in some from the audience as well. But like, I think there's a couple of stages to a Q&A, right? There's like the preparation or before the session, right? Which is where a lot of if not most of the hard work goes into. And then there's during, like when it goes live, and then even some stuff that happens afterwards. But while we're talking about before the session, what do you do, or how or what do you prepare as a Q&A facilitator or running the Q&A?
Right, so just to give everyone a little bit more background, Slido actually runs monthly Q&As, and we run them for 90 minutes. So what we do is we have content for 60 minutes, and then we have Q&A for 30 minutes. It's a lot, right? If you think about it, it's 1/3 of your content or of your time where all the company comes together is dedicated just for Q&A. And we have been doing this ever since I can remember. And we always have questions, and many times we don't have a chance to answer all of them. So the question, how do we prepare, goes like this. 4 days before the all hands meeting, we open the Q&A in advance. And you might ask yourself, why would you do it? There are 2 reasons really. First one is to make sure that we include everyone across the time zones. Like Slido has people all around the world, from Australia to India to Las Vegas. So you can imagine no matter what time we pick, there will be a chunk of people who will not able to make it live. So in this way, we make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And even if they can't join us live, they can still pop their questions in. The second reason why we open the Q&A in advance is to make sure that we give some breathing space to our leadership. As you can imagine, and I'm sure that some of you on this call are leaders, it is not an easy task to answer a question live, right? If you're unprepared, and if the question comes through and you haven't really had a chance to look into this before. So what we do is that we also give a chance to our leadership to go through the questions. Our GM, Pali, who was at the webinar last week, if some of you attended, is looking at the questions. And as he said in his own words, it's a team sport. So it's not only him, but it's also other exec people and other leaders who are helping to craft the answers. We're using a Google Doc. Often it's me or my colleague Sabine who are helping to provide feedback, and we're making sure that the responses are concise, they make sense, and it's a great way how to prepare. Additionally, one day before the all hands, so our all hands is usually on Friday, so on Thursday we have an 1 hour rehearsal where we go through the whole flow, and we also touch on the Q&A and make sure that we have our answers ready.
Very cool. Thank you. And yeah, so obviously a lot of work goes into it, right? But something that's come up a few times in today is some of the features, right? So what about, like, how do you decide on adding something like moderation or anonymity, right? Deciding on whether the questions should be anonymous or not. Like you said, it's very relevant for us at Slido. We're always thinking about it, but how do you decide on those big questions?
Sure. So I can describe how we decided to run things in Slido, and really appreciate that every company and culture might be different. So we have decided to turn the moderation off. We do not have moderation. That means that all questions that people submit are coming through live and everybody can see them. The reason why we have done this is because Slido is on a mission to give everyone a voice, right? So it makes sense, and it makes sense that we enable this option to everyone. I understand that there's some concern when companies are like, okay, we really don't want to, let all the input come through and come live. In which case, you can turn the moderation on, but I think it is important to explain the why behind. And also, and this is just my opinion, but I think like people are the best moderators, right? Like they will let you know what is relevant and what is not. And with the Slido upvotes and downvotes, the conversation is moderated by them and not necessarily by myself or our internal comms or our leadership who are like, okay, this question is out. And oftentimes, even if the question is not, the tone of voice is not right, or it's like something super irrelevant that maybe one person cares about, you'll see that it doesn't get to the top and people will let you know what they think. So yeah, those are my thoughts on moderation.
Awesome. Thank you. And actually something that's come in from the audience as well. This is a little bit about the pre-work. So by opening a Q&A in advance, do participants also see other questions ahead of time? I guess that can be encouraging as well to help trigger like other questions?
Yes, 100%. So if you turn the moderation off, or even if you have the moderation on but approve the questions as they're coming in, everyone is able to see them. So I really like that time period actually from when we open the Q&A until the live all hands, those 3 or 4 days, because it's almost like a silent conversation happening on the back end, right? Like people read the questions, they upvote, they downvote. We also enable replies. So oftentimes they could even reply to each other. Just as you can, actually, now that I'm looking at the sidebar. So imagine a scenario when our top question is something related to the product. What I really like to see is when we have some product managers who actually jump in even 2 days before the all hands and they answer the questions in the thread, right? So this also allows everyone to jump in and share their thoughts, because oftentimes it doesn't have to be the general manager or the CEO or the head of people that is an expert on everything. It's a collective work.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, really interesting. And we've got another one before we move on to sort of the during the session part. I would love to get this one answered because it's really interesting. So somebody's asked the question, culturally, they found that now people refuse to submit questions before their event, and only during the event are they feeling comfortable. So like, how do you get people to ask these questions before specifically? Is there anything that you do to encourage that?
That's a very interesting question. I would love to learn more about this use case. So if this person is willing to share, like, please drop us an email. Would love to follow up. So how would I encourage people? Let me think about this one. I mean, there's a way how you can pre-seed questions into Slido, right? Like just like Andrew did with the question for me, as you have seen earlier. And I think sometimes it is really about that first step. And I think you mentioned it also in the work cloud, where people are uncertain. They're like, it's awkward, it's silent, I don't want to be the first one, and so on and so forth. So I would say you can think about like asking some questions yourself. The second thing could be the feature of anonymity, right? So I would ask you a question, is that Q&A anonymous? If it's not, then I can see why people might not feel comfortable to share questions in. So yeah, those are the two tips I would say. But yeah, super happy to talk more if you feel like sharing.
Yeah, definitely. We're always keen to hear from people about these interesting use cases. Okay, so Nadia, here we go. So you've done all the prep, right? You've got to the time, right? Your Q&A or your session is live, okay? What are and you want it to be running smoothly, but what are your like first steps as a facilitator, as the session's going live? What are you doing?
So I actually, as I mentioned at the beginning, like I have one job, which is to make the flow as seamless as possible. So what we do at the All Hands, I know we're not talking about polls, but we always start with an ice-breaking poll, as are people joining in. And so I run that poll, I facilitate the poll, and this is where I bring our leadership in, I ask their opinions, and then we go directly to the agenda and we recommend people to ask questions. Then I fade away and we have the content that is being shared. And then, as mentioned, after 60 minutes, I come back on the stage and I take the questions. What I try to do is to make sure that I group them in a way that if we're talking, for example, about, I don't know, the Zoom integration or Microsoft integration, right? Like I make sure that I tie the questions about integration for our head of product. If we have some people questions, I bring on stage our head of people. And in the background, I have a helper always. She's called Sylvie, and she's actually working in our internal comms, and she's helping me with the labels that Andrew has just shown you. This is super helpful if you have bigger Q&A sessions or all hands leadership sessions, because I'm quite busy with trying to build the flow and highlight and archive. And what really helps me is to know that there's one more question for Pali or one more question for Kati. So this is the job of the person in the backend. And I would definitely recommend you, if you're stressed out from the tech setup or if you are the facilitator, get help and do it as a team. It's super helpful.
That's great. And actually, you answered my next question, which was like, do you have people helping you? And it's very cool to see you do. I know today I definitely got people helping, and it definitely calms the soul. But we've got one, I've got a couple more for here, but actually there's one that's come in that just says, again, an anonymous one, but what if I get hundreds of questions that are coming in for moderation and it scrolls so quickly? What do you do in this case when the Q&A is really going off the wire?
There are a couple of things you can do. So if you're from a large company and you have a lot of questions, there are some companies who actually close the Q&A beforehand, right? So you would say, okay, so our all hands is on Friday. You have until Thursday to submit your questions. And from that time, the Q&A will be closed. So this will allow you to really skim through the questions that have come through and create that flow that I was mentioning earlier. I would not recommend to close the Q&A if you feel like you can handle those questions coming in live, but if you feel that that's really limiting and you have 100,000 people on the call, then I would imagine that could be a good step. The second thing is, and I don't believe Andrew has shown you this tip, but the second thing is that you can star your questions. So you can think of stars as bookmarks. And on the back end, you can literally press a little star next to the questions that you like. And you can show only the star questions on your... Oh, Andrew is sharing content. Amazing. So Andrew, why don't you show us how we can start questions? Okay, great. So this is the little star, very easy. And then what happens if you click the filter on the top? You can actually select start questions only. And this means if you would hit the present mode now, you would only see the start questions. Okay, here we go. And this would allow you to really focus on the questions that you have bookmarked without being, overwhelmed by the influx of the new questions coming through. So yeah, now we can see just the start questions and no more. So that's also a good hack that I would recommend.
Very cool. And Andrew, thank you for jumping in and showing us. Very, very good. Like I said, what a pro. And Nadia, something that I always get sort of that stresses me out, but inspired by watching you, right, is how do you pick the questions when they're coming in, especially when there's lots of them, but like when you start getting maybe something like a big topic that's becoming like a really big talking point, how do you decide which questions to answer, and how much time are you allocating typically for these questions?
Right. So in terms of the time as mentioned, it would be that half hour. And in terms of which questions I pick, like usually I really try to remind people to upvote the questions. And I did it sneakily in the chat a while before when Andrew was having his Q&A, because oftentimes we forget, and it's the best way how you can tell us what's relevant. So even now, I would recommend you to take a look at the Q&A, hit a like next to a question you like, because that really is the best check on what matters to people, and we want to make sure that Q&As are relevant, and that's why we need to hear from you, right? So that would be my answer. To take a look at the most popular questions and tie them into groups to make sure that we don't really jump from one topic to another. Having a person in the backend who is helping with the labels, which allows me to ask the questions to the correct speaker. And I would just say, like, our GM is often joking that it's like an art to moderate, the Q&A in a good way, because you have to like juggle so many different things. But I would be very honest, like you would make mistakes, like make no mistakes, you will make mistakes. Like that's what I would say. There's always something that you can learn, that you can do better. I just hosted a Q&A session an hour ago, and I was thinking like, oh gosh, I could have done this differently. But every single time we do this, we learn something more. And people appreciate it, right? So I would just say, just go there, do it, whether you're in the tech role, whether you're a facilitator, whether you're a leader. Showing that you care really counts to people and to your audience.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. Now we've got a few minutes left, and I think time for a few more questions. And I've got another one for you. Quite a big topic. Like, how do you deal with like inappropriate or toxic questions, right? What are your steps for doing this, especially in a live situation that's pretty difficult?
Right. So I would say this starts with communication and setting the right expectations. So for example, at Slido, we have one of our core values that says we care. I know it might sound cheesy to you, but it really is not. And we even have it on the wall. It's like a massive green thing that says we care. And I think like this is what we try to remind ourselves every single day as we work together, as we interact, and as we're holding, those Q&As. So that's like the first thing. If you feel that there's a topic that is, triggering some of the questions, it's also a good idea to put yourselves into the shoes of the participants and understand why there's suddenly, this topic that comes up. Other thing I would say is what I mentioned earlier, that your audience is oftentimes your moderator. And when we had those instances at Slido, is that there was a question which, the tone of voice wasn't really in line with our values, I would say. People let this person know, even though it was anonymous, right? And it wasn't even coming from the leadership. It was a peer-to-peer conversation in the thread. And if it gets truly, if you feel like, okay, there's a word that shouldn't be up on the screen, Slido has a profanity filter. So if really there are some questions that would be off the mark, Slido actually filters them out by itself, even if the moderation is off.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, we've got one that's come in now, a question, which is talking about like follow-ups to responses given in a meeting. And actually this kind of like shifts quite well into like what you do afterwards, right? So like you've got to end a Q&A, okay? That's quite hard to do, like, when you come into the end of it, do these things. But what happens to any of those unanswered questions near the end?
Yeah, so a couple of things happen. So as I was mentioning before, we actually encourage people to upvote. Since Slido has less than 300 employees, our threshold is 5 likes. This can vary massively based on how big your organization is. If you, again, have like 70,000 employees, of course, 5 likes is probably not a good threshold. So just work with that. This is our commitment, and we deliver on this commitment in a way that we really take a look at the questions afterwards. You can head to Slido Analytics, and not only you can see all the questions that were asked, but you can also see the sentiment, right? So it shows you how many questions were positive, neutral, or negative, which is really fascinating to see. You can see some of the trends, and then we take a look at the questions and answer them. There's a couple of ways. We choose to do a Google Doc, which we share with everyone afterwards, but you can even record a quick video, such as vidcast, right? So you can even take the questions, read it out, and answer on a video for everyone. But I would say the most important thing is to act on them, right? Because if you just follow up and nothing ever happens, you will not build the trust with your team and that accountability. So I would say that's not the end. Just answering the question is not the end. And you really need to put your heads together, see what really matters to people, and get their answers to them and show this as well.
Thank you so much. And now we've got some more questions coming in, and I'd love to give them time, but unfortunately we are at the end. So Nadia, I just want to say thank you to you for answering my questions as well as the audience's questions, and giving us your time today. So I'm gonna wrap up, but yeah, just thank you so much, Nadia. Really appreciate your time. So to give everyone a quick recap of today, like why should you use Slido Q&A, right? Well, hopefully you're convinced by now. If you weren't at the start, hopefully you are, right? It's so simple to use, and you've seen that like both as a participant, but also as somebody who's going to be using Slido, right? You've seen how easy it is, and you can see the value that it offers as well. Remember that iceberg analogy that we used, right? And how those deeper values, like building trust with you and your audience, but also like it's so accessible. Okay, so not only in the sense that like anybody can use it as long as they've got like a connection to the internet, but also it's accessible in the sense that we have lots of integrations for Slido as well. So today you've seen us use WebEx, partnered up with Google Slides, right? We've teamed them up together like a Marvel team up, but also it's available on Slido is available as an add-on into PowerPoint, and we've got the Mac integration coming soon as well. I saw that as a question that is on its way. If you're a Teams user, like Slido works there as well. And also like really exciting news for the Zoom crew, the integration for Zoom is also coming really soon as well. So I'd love to get your feedback. Who would we be at Slido if we didn't get your feedback, right? So we've got a couple of questions in here. I want to share the results to just the first one. Okay, don't worry, your other responses won't be shared. I just want the first one. I wanted to know, how do you feel about running a Slido Q&A now? And I can see a shift, an upwards trend, which is exactly what we wanted. So thank you so much. Keep submitting your responses. The survey will remain open. We'll try to get back to everybody with your questions afterwards when we reach out post webinar. But also, if you have anything more immediate that you want answers to, remember you can head to our community page, our Community and Help Center. It's got hundreds, if not thousands, of really handy articles, videos, walkthrough guides. And remember, I'm from customer care. You can always reach out to our customer care team as well. We're available 24/7. We're happy to help. And everybody, that is it. Just a huge thank you for giving us your time today again. On behalf of everyone else here, I hope you got some value from this, and looking forward to seeing you in the Slido universe soon. We should make that a thing, Slido universe. I like that, right? Like, yeah, we agree.
Just like Marvel.
Just like Marvel, yeah. I've thrown in two Marvel. I'm not even like a huge Marvel fan. I'm just a Slidoverse guy. Yeah, I love that idea. So
it's meant to be Star Wars, man. Star Wars and Star Trek.
Hey, both owned by Disney, man. So
that's true. They own it all.
Yeah, they own it all. Yeah. But again, thank you so much, everybody. Have an excellent rest of your day, and yeah, cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.